Hello, I'm Rick Hertless, founder of His Gospel Power. Thank you for joining with our program as we look into 1 Timothy chapter 5. We're in the 11th verse today. We're talking about the elderly this week. We've been talking about them actually last week as well. But, even more so, I've been hearing in the news again, the numbers for this COVID virus. No matter what you think about the COVID virus, it seems the indisputable facts are 80% of those dying of COVID are in the nursing homes. That's unacceptable, especially when you're talking about governors who are placing people who have been exposed to COVID in the nursing home. Now, there seems like there's an agenda there. It seems to me like, which of course, it's a fact. This is a fact. The global elite want to deplete the population of the world. That is a fact. And they are bent on depleting the population of the world. They think only 500 million people, a half a billion people, should live on the earth. Now, of course, they're not lining up to be some of the first to leave. They're saying that you should leave because, they're the elite and they're great, and so that's okay. But what I see is that 80% of the deaths are in nursing homes. That is not honoring our widows, and it is not honoring our elderly. And so that is appalling, is what it is. And so now we're looking at today, and this is specific. This is very specific as to how we are to treat our elderly. Now, again, I already talked about this yesterday. It's talking about the church. Because the world, you can't expect them to do any more than what the world does. The world cares about itself. End of story. They can act like they care about others. They can act like they care about people dying and all of that, but they don't. I mean, that's obvious by the news. That's obvious by the fact these governors are placing at risk or placing infected people in an at-risk environment. So that's fairly obvious that they don't care about anyone else. But as the church, we are supposed to care about others, and specifically the widows and the orphans. Well, before we get too much further into it, please go to hisgospelpower.org, click on the donate button or the contact us button. And thank you to all of those who do support our ministry. This is a ministry that goes around the world, and it is through your prayers and through your support that we're able to continue. Okay, so now we are 1 Timothy 5:11, and it says, but refuse the younger widows. So, see, in other words, what he's telling here, it's an emphasis to make sure that you take care of the elderly. But then he says, but refuse the younger widows, for when they have begun to grow wanton against Christ, they desire to marry, having condemnation because they have cast off their first faith. In other words, the younger ones are still more worried about the flesh, and they're still more worried about the party. Let's go party. And so they are, he is saying, look, what I'm telling you is, this Paul is saying, what I'm telling you is take care of the elderly. These other ones are still young enough to take care of themselves. That's what he's saying. And so, and then he goes on, he says, and besides, they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but also gossips, busybodies, saying things which they ought not. Listen, what do we see in our society? What does welfare bring? It brings people who learn to be idle. They don't have anything else to do except to steal, to kill, and destroy. That is all. One thing, if this virus did anything at all, it gave money to people who otherwise would not have money and plenty of time to go do the things that they're doing right now. This protests and all of these kind of things, it has given them plenty of time to do it. They have grown idle, and of course they want to they want things their own way, which in other words, basically just keep giving me money. I want to do nothing, keep giving me money. And you're talking about not doing that. You're talking about you're not letting me do whatever I want. A bunch of spoiled little kids. you're not letting me do whatever I want, so I'm going to riot, I'm going to protest, I'm going to kill, steal, and destroy. That's what Satan does. And so that's what's going on. That is absolutely what's going on in our society. They are spoiled little brats that want everything they have without doing anything. And now they know that we're saying, well, no, you can't do that. They don't want that. That's what they think socialism is. But unfortunately, socialism is slavery. It will, and in fact, in many cases, it's worse than slavery ever thought about. Because at least the slave masters would take care of their slaves so they could have strength to keep on working. They would take care of their slaves. They'd feed them, give them a roof over their head and everything else. Socialism does not do that. They do not care if you die in the streets, live in the streets, or whatever. Those of you who think you have a handle on what socialism is, you don't. Take a look at Venezuela. Take a look at just about any other communist nation. If you want to live in a shack or a cardboard box, well, that is socialism, leads to communism and usually a dictatorship, always. So that is why he is saying, look, you don't want to do this with these women because they're still young enough to take care of themselves, and you're just going to make them lazy. You're going to give them a reason not to have to do anything, and you're going to make them lazy. And then they will not honor God. That's the bottom line here. All of what he's trying to tell us right here is that we should look for ways to honor God and not be given ways to forget about him and then live by the flesh. Ron Stortle.
And really, the way I see this written, it actually can also be used for young men, but back then they really didn't have as much of a problem. A lot of it comes down to maturity. Because of the maturity of both boys and girls at that age, it's just like them today, like you exactly explained. If they don't have anything to do and be productive, what do non-productive people do? They look for ways to get in trouble, for the most part. Because at that age, if they're not encouraged to be productive, then they're encouraged to cause mischief.
Right.
But it's specifically talking about the women because it's implied that boys at this age are probably out in the field working, doing things like that. So that's why they're addressing the women, because they normally weren't doing that. They were raising families at that age.
Yeah, if you had a widower who was young enough and his wife died, of course there would be a grieving period and he would still grieve, but then he would go right back to work.
Yes.
The women, they didn't work. See, or they did. Okay, maybe I should rephrase that. They worked, but they did not work outside the home, or they worked as the helpmate, which Genesis tells them to do, as the helpmate to their husband. Well, once their husband died, and if he was in the fields, well, the owners wouldn't necessarily, we don't need you anymore. You know, I needed the man to be out here because he can carry things and everything. All you can do is just pick up a little of the excess. And so they didn't need the woman anymore. But the man, if the woman dies, it's a different scenario because he's still got the man's strength and all of those kind of things. He was still able to produce for the owner of the field.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Yeah. So, and of course, then many women who, if they didn't go to the field or whatever, they worked in the house. They took care of the children. They cooked. They cleaned. They did all of those things. So yes, they were absolutely vital to the family unit. But as far as the income goes, they did not work for an income. That was left up to the man.
You know, for the last 2 days, the story that keeps popping into my head through this whole thing as a perfect example is the story of Ruth.
Yes.
Ruth, because she was with her mother didn't have a husband, she didn't have a husband. So every day Ruth would go out to the field to collect the excess that was being dropped for her from Boaz. So you look at that scenario. Ruth was taking care of her mother. She didn't have a husband, but she wasn't...
Actually, more importantly, she was taking care of her mother-in-law.
Yes.
Which most would have just said, okay, you go your own way, I'm going to go my own way. It was her mother-in-law. It wasn't even her mother.
But she wasn't doing specific work, but she was also taking on that role of taking care of the household, her mother-in-law. So, I mean, she was doing this entire passage here.
How was she doing it, though? She was gleaning the field. She wasn't actually a hireling.
Right.
She didn't really have a job. Basically, it's a beggar. You go get what you can get. And remember Boaz, he told them because he fancied her that, look, leave a little bit extra for her.
Right.
But in the norm, it would have just been, you just get what you can, which was really the scraps. We're talking about, they were picking up scraps. That was gleaning the field, was going out and getting scraps.
I mean, and we can relate to that where we live. We got cornfields everywhere.
Right, exactly.
When we see the cornfields harvested and you think about scraps, it is minimal.
There's nothing.
Almost, I mean,
Well,
we got tractors.
With machines these days, but back in the day, without the machines, there may have been a little bit left over, and somebody goes back and,
something they missed.
Right,
normally.
something was missed. But for the most part, yes, gleaning the field means the scraps. That's all it means.
If you really want to put this passage into context, go read the book of Ruth, and you'll completely understand where Paul's coming from when he was writing this about how to take care of the elderly and the young. Ruth didn't fit this passage we're reading right now.
Yeah, because she was young enough to get a husband.
She was. But
she chose to stay with her mother-in-law.
Right, so she didn't fall into this passage where she needed to be taken care of.
Right.
Because she wasn't falling back into the sins that are being discussed here.
Well, not only that, this is written to the church of Jesus Christ. That wasn't the same as the law of the Jews.
Yeah.
So we're talking about two different time periods for certain. We're really talking about two different scenarios, although there was provisions for the wife that died. One of the provisions, for the husband that died, rather. One of the provisions was that the brother of the wife, the brother that died, would take his wife and give her a child, a male child. Why? Well, because in her older years, the male could take care of his mother.
Yeah.
So there was provision still. But yes, this is almost taking it one step over that.
But this would have been a good scenario to not enroll Ruth into this program.
Yes.
We'll say program, because she was still young enough that she didn't need to be in it. But to give her credit, she wasn't falling into these sins. She was being productive, so she didn't need to be enrolled in it. But this encourages why it shouldn't be, because they should be like Ruth.
Right. And, of course, Ruth, the reason she was put in the Bible is she lived a godly life.
Yes.
She did what she didn't have to do. She went with her mother-in-law, who was a Jew, and Ruth was a Moabitess, so she was a Moabite. She was not a Jew, and the Jews hated the Moabites, actually. So she was not a Jew, but yet she's in the lineage of Jesus. I mean, that's a very cool thing. Why? Because she showed a godly life from her heart.
Yeah.
You see, God cares about our heart. He doesn't care about where we are, where we're from, all of this racist stuff we're talking about. It's like I heard yesterday, there was some kid up on his soapbox. Where are all the churches during all this racist stuff? How come they're not condemning it? Oh, wait a minute. And the man that I heard talking about it, he was exactly right. He says, well, I don't know if any true believer that is condoning racism. So we've been coming against racism as long as I can remember.
And we discussed it last week. If the church was really teaching it correctly, they would be teaching there is no such thing as racism. So the narrative...
That's right. We wouldn't be talking about black, brown, white, yellow, or white. We'd be just talking about Christians.
There would be no racist narrative in the church.
That's right.
They would be discouraging the actual concept of it because in the church it truly doesn't exist.
Well, I mean, it doesn't and it does. You made a great point last week in saying, well, our black brother's this or our brown brother's this. Well, why would you say that? How come they're not just our brothers?
Yeah.
Now, so the church has fallen into it to some degree. However, said,
when I say the church, I mean the true church.
I know the true church, yes, yeah. But even the true church, they delineate between the skin color mainly to make a point. I think that look, we don't care. I truly do not care what color someone's skin is. I don't care. Are they a brother or are they not? Are they in the world or are they not? Okay, so at that point, that's all that should matter. So many of them delineate because of skin color for that reason to try to fight. They think they're fighting racism. But in truth, what you just said exactly, why shouldn't it just be, instead of my black brother Joe, why did it not just be Brother Joe? Because then everybody who's listening they say, oh, well, he's not, showing that he's black or anything. He's just saying he's my brother.
Yeah, so these churches keep perpetuating the narrative because they keep bringing it up. If they would just stop identifying the differences, then nobody would be talking about it and it would go away.
Well, and of course, the world identifies the differences for a reason.
Political.
They do it politically to keep the division.
Yes.
It keeps their power. As long as they can keep us separated, then they keep their own power. If we ever unite, if we ever say, to heck with this noise, it's not my brown brother, it's not black, not white, we're all just people. And actually, to your point last week as well, which of course we know, we all came from Adam. If you're a Bible believer, then we all came from Adam anyway. And in fact, just like you said, even if you're an evolutionary believer, we all came from the same lizard. We all came from lizards. We're from one source. We all came from the same amoeba or whatever, because they remember, according to the stupid evolutionists, is that somehow or another this crystal started going billions and billions of miles per hour. It blew up and it made this one single cell, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, we got all this.
Wait,
so we still all came from the same place.
So what you're saying is we're all aliens?
Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah, we won't even go there.
Exactly. I don't know what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's how crazy this conversation
it all
could
gets
get.
crazy. But what instead, we should be looking at Ephesians 2:19 as Christians. Now, therefore, you are no longer strangers and foreigners. You're not my black brother. You're not my brown brother. You are my brother. You are not a foreigner. You're not a stranger, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God. I have no idea what color we'll be when we get up to heaven. We could be green for all I know. I don't know. Maybe God will keep the same colors. I don't know. It doesn't matter, because we're not going to care. It's not going to. We're going to be looking so far past that in fact, really,
all Scripture says is we'll be able to recognize. It doesn't say how we'll be able to recognize. It may be spiritually recognized.
Well, it does say we will be white as snow, so we may be all white.
Yeah,
I think that's more symbolism than anything, because that means that we will not have darkness in us. I don't know what color we'll have. We may have no color. Maybe it's clear. I don't know.
It doesn't matter,
and it does not matter, because we're not going to be pointing out, oh, well, you're the black one and you're the brown one, and Jesus isn't going to segregate anything out. No, we're all fellow citizens with the saints. That's the way it should be. Well, that's all the time that we have. Thank you for joining with our program. Please go to hisgospelpower.org, click on the donate button or the contact us button. Until next time, I pray you receive His gospel power today.
He died for you. He died for me. From our sin, He set us free. He loved us so, His life He gave. So if we ask, we can be saved. He's calling you, He's calling you. Jesus Christ is calling you. He's calling you. If He's touched your heart and soul, then come let Jesus make you whole. Come kneel with me and we will pray that all your sin be washed away. Don't be afraid, don't be ashamed. Just come and pray. if he's touched your